We begin today's shiur at the third wide line on Daf Lametes at the Mishnah. The Mishnah deals with who is expected to fulfill the mitzvah of Yibum when a man died leaving several brothers. Which one of the brothers is sought after for the mitzvah? Mitzvah begodol liyabim. It is preferable, it is the first choice, that the eldest of the surviving brothers does the Yibum. Lo rotza, mehalchin al kol ha'achin. If he should not want to do the mitzvah, so we seek out the other brothers. Lo rotzu, if they did not want, chozrin eitzel godol. We go back to the eldest of the surviving brothers, v'omrim loi, and we tell him, olecha mitzvah, it is upon you to fulfill the mitzvah, o chaloitz o yabeim. Either you release her through the shoe removal ceremony, or marry her. Tola bekoton ad shi'adil. If, let us say, the brother said, wait for the minor. Koton is a brother who's under bar mitzvah age, less than bar mitzvah age, and he says, and the older brother says, let's wait for the younger brother until he reaches adulthood, and he'll do the mitzvah. Ubegadol ad sheyavoy mimidiras hayam. Or they say there's an older brother from amongst us that's abroad, and let's wait for him to come back home. Oy cheresh, oy shoite. Or they are, there's a brother that's sick, he's incapable of speech or of hearing, or he's currently mentally unbalanced. And the claim is, let's wait till they get better. Ein shoymin lo. We don't listen to he who suggests any of these suggestions. Ela omrim lo. Rather, we say to him, alecho mitzvah. The mitzvah is upon you. O chaloitz, o yabeim. So that if you have the eldest of the brothers claiming or suggesting any of these suggestions, we say, sorry, we're going to, we insist upon you to take action, either to release her through the shoe removal ceremony, chalitza, or marriage. Before we continue in the Gemara itself, we glance at the side where we have a nosei mivneh. Nosei is a topic heading, mivneh a structural note. In our marked Gemaras, you'll see that we feature a Roman numeral 1, and on the top line of Omid Beis, Roman numeral number 2. These represent Shnei Lishonos, two versions, B'She'elas Eza Odif, regarding the question of which is better, given a choice, which to choose. Number 1, Bias Tsoyer Oy Chalitzas Godol. According to the first Lashon, the choice presented is a younger brother doing the act of marriage, yibum, of having intimacy with the widow sister-in-law, or chalitza of the gadol, chalitza, the shoe removal ceremony done by the eldest of the surviving brothers. So if that is the choice, what should we opt for? On Omid Beis, there is going to be a second presentation of this issue, and we write in our note, L'chuli alma bias tzor odif. According to all opinions, the marriage done by a younger one of the surviving brothers is a better choice. Ha'im chalitza de godol odif al chalitza de tzoyer. The question that will be presented, however, is, given the choice of chalitza, the shoe removal ceremony involving the elder surviving brother or one of the younger brothers, which do we say that the chalitza of the gadol is preferable? Only shnehem shavim, or do we say when it comes to a choice of which brother is going to do the chalitza, so both are really equal? As the Gemara unfolds, you'll see triangles that appear in varying directions, with the point facing up, nisayon lochiach, there will be an attempt to show bias koton adif. This is within the first lashon, where the choice was the bia of the koton, the marriage done by the younger of the brothers, versus chalitza of the gadol, and the inverted triangle will highlight the direction of chalitzas gadol adif. So now we turn back to the Gemara itself. Itmar, bias koton v'chalitzas gadol. The intimacy, i.e., marriage done by a younger brother, and we have to emphasize that here the term koton does not mean a minor, because in order to do yibum, we insist on someone being bar mitzvah. But we are referring to a younger of the surviving brothers who is, of course, above bar mitzvah age. So the issue here is bias koton versus chalitzas gadol, the chalitza done, however, by the elder surviving brother, which is better. Pligi ba Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So we have a machlokes amoroyim between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Chad Omar bias koton adifa. One opinion says that we would prefer the intimacy, the marriage done by a younger brother. V'chad Omar chalitzas gadol adifa. And the other one says that if push comes to shove, we will opt to give precedence to the chalitza because it's being done by the gadol. So the first opinion emphasizes the goal, and the second opinion emphasizes the individual. Man de Omar bias koton adifa deha mitzvah b'yibum. The opinion that says that the intimacy, hence marriage, done by the younger of the brothers is better than chalitza done by the gadol, deha mitzvah b'yibum, because the primary mitzvah is to marry the widow. Uman de Omar chalitzas gadol adifa. The opinion that says that we would give precedence to chalitza done by the elder surviving brother, b'mokem gadol bias koton lav klum hi. When you're in the presence, or when you have the option of the gadol, the elder brother, doing something, even if it happens to be chalitza, that so overshadows whatever significance you might have attached to the marriage done by the younger brother. Tanan. Notice the markings as we introduced them earlier. Here we're going to try to show that bias koton is odif, is preferable. Later we're going to try to show that chalitzas gadol is odif. Tanan. Lo ratza machzirin al kol ha'achin. This was a quote from the Mishnah. You can see we have a squiggled arrow to the side. You can see where this is coming from above by aligning these markings. And it said there, Lo ratza, he didn't want, so we seek out the other brothers. My love, what is this to mean? Doesn't it mean Lo ratza liabim elo lachlotz, that the eldest of the surviving brothers doesn't want to do yibum, but he will do chalitza, but he doesn't want to do yibum. He's willing to do chalitza. The katani, and the Mishnah says mehalchin eitzel ha'achim, that we go to the other brothers, younger brothers. Maybe one of them will do yibum. Shma mino. So from here we conclude bias koton adifa. So this would seem to be conclusive that the intimacy, hence marriage, done by the younger of surviving brother is better. Lo, the Gemara rejects this. Rather, the reading of the Mishnah is to be understood thusly: Lo rotza lachlois v'lo li'avim. The gadol, the oldest of the brothers, wasn't willing to cooperate at all. He wasn't going to do chalitza nor yibum. And so from this, you cannot come to a conclusion of, we'll say the B of the koton is better than the chalitza gadol here, because the gadol doesn't want to do chalitza either. The Gemara asks, if that's how you're reading the Mishnah, let's see if we can see consistency. De kavosa gabi ho'achin loy rotzu. You notice the expression lo rotzu appeared in the Mishnah regarding the other brothers. Notice we have an arrow also to the side of the Gemara text. You can see where this is coming from. We used also a dot underline to help you spot it more efficiently. So what does lo ratzu mean? If lo ratza by the gadol meant he doesn't want to do anything, so lo ratzu, you're going to have to say the same thing regarding the other brothers. Lo lachlos velo liabim. They don't want to do anything either. Well, if that's the pshat in the Mishnah, amai choizrim eitzel hagadol, why does the Mishnah describe them going back to the gadol? Lemichbei. It is then to force him to do something. Well, lichbei ledidu. Then why don't they just force one of the other brothers? If it's already an issue of no one wants to cooperate, then why does the Mishnah speak about going back to the eldest brother? If it's a matter of forcing, there's no reason to go back to the eldest brother to force him to do something, to, let's say, to do chalitza. The rabbis could have forced one of these younger brothers, if that's what we're coming to. So the Gemara says, no, we can keep the pshat of lo rotzu, meaning lo rotzu lachlotz velo liabim. And if you'll ask, so then why are we going back to the eldest if the other brothers also don't want to do anything? Kevan to mitzvah leidi de ramya. Since the primary mitzvah is upon the eldest of the surviving brothers to do something, when it comes to forcing, we'll also force him. Tanan. Now, with Gemara markings, you can see that the direction the Gemara is taking is the opposite of the one before. Here we're going to try to show that chalitzas gadol is adif. The quote from the Mishnah, Tala bekoton achi akil. If the elder brother said, why not wait for the minor brother until he becomes of age? Ein shoymin lo. We don't listen. We don't heed that. If, as you were suggesting, that the bia of the koton is a preferable approach, amai ein shoymin lo, why wouldn't we listen to the elder brother suggesting to wait for the minor to become of age? Why do we say ein shoymin lo? Nintar, wait, let's wait. Dilmo godil umiabim. Maybe he'll become of age and do the yibum. Now, the fact that we see that we don't do that, that shows us that the godol is sought out for doing the mitzvah, even if it's a matter of doing the chalitza. The Gemara asks, Uletamech, according to what you're trying to argue, Ubegadol, this is a quote from the Mishnah, Ubegadol at shiyavo midei sayam ein shoymin lo. If it's a suggestion to wait for the eldest brother until he comes back from overseas, well, we don't listen to that either, amai. Why wouldn't we listen to that? Nintar dilma osi v'chalitz. If, as you're trying to argue, that chalitz's gadol is adif, so here's a chance to wait for the gadol to come back from abroad, and maybe he'll come and do chalitza. And yet the Mishnah said we don't listen. Ella, rather the understanding is different. When it comes to these kind of suggestions, let's wait for the koton. Let's wait for the gadol. This has to do with delay. Ella kol shuhi mitzvah lo mashinon. When it comes to delaying the performance of a mitzvah, that we do not do. Therefore, from here you cannot come to any conclusion regarding the two choices that are in front of you. A gadol is prepared to do chalitza, and a koton is prepared to do yibum, which, a koton meaning a younger of the brothers, not a minor, is prepared to do yibum, which is better. We don't see that from over here. And just to repeat, the reason in the Mishnah that we say ein shoymin lo, that we don't abide by these suggestions, because these suggestions entail delay, waiting for the brother to come back or to become of age. And the rule is shir mitzvah lo mashina, delaying mitzvah performance, we do not delay. Is the Amri. We continue now at the top of Omid Beis. take note of the fact that we have a little starred note on the side, Simanu Hachi Laharos Orko Shaloshan Hasheni. We've used a long marking following this Roman numeral number 2, simply to show the length of this second Lashon, the second version. Is the Amri. There are those that say, Bia, the Bia Kuli Amalo Pligi, when it comes to the intimacy and hence marriage of one of the surviving brothers and the widow, everyone agrees, the Bias Katan Adifa, that the marriage done by one of the younger brothers is better than Chalitza done by the older brother. Ki Pligi, the Chalitza's Katan. The Machlokes that we saw, we had a Machlokes Amoraim, we pointed out the names, that is Rabbi Yochanan, Rishum, and Levi. Their Machlokes concerns the Chalitza done by a Katan, the Hachi Itmar, and thusly we are to understand their Machlokes. Chalitzas Katan v'Chalitzas Gadol. You have a choice of 2 surviving brothers. One is going to do Chalitza, the other one will do also only Chalitza. The difference between them is that one is younger, one is older. Pligi Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, they have a Machlokes, a controversy. Chad Omar Chalitzas Gadol Adifa. One says that we prefer the Chalitza done by the Gadol. The Chad the Gadol meaning the elder of the surviving brothers. The Chad Ki Hadodi Ninu. That when it comes to the choice between who should do the Chalitza, there isn't room to say that one is better than the other, one is more desirable than the other. Man Diomar Chalitzas Gadol Adifa. The one who says that Chalitza, if that is all that's is being offered to be done, is the case, then let the Gadol do it. He's preferred. The mitzvah begadol. The preferred way of doing this is through the Gadol. V'idach, and the other opinion, ki aminu mitzvah gadol. When do we say that the mitzvah, the preferable way, is to do it through the elder brother? That's when it comes to a choice of who should do the marriage. So if you had a couple of brothers, each one willing to do the marriage with the widowed sister-in-law, so then we would say that the gadol is adif. But when it comes to releasing her, the younger, the older, they're on equal footing. It doesn't matter who is the one that's responsible for releasing her to marry someone from the shuk, from someone from the outside. We have a new marking, and on the side under the mivneh heading, the house shape will appear in 2 directions. It too is going to reflect the 2 different approaches. The first house marking with the point facing up, Lahochiach the Chalitzas Gadol, we've written on the side, it's here to show that the shoe removal done by the elder is in fact preferred. And the inverted house is going to show the Shneim Shavim, that both are equal. Tanan. Loi Rotzu Chozrin Eitzel Gadol. Again, you can see a quote from our Mishnah. It said that they didn't want, so we go back to the eldest brother. My lav Loi Rotzu Liabeim Elo Lachloitz. The other brothers didn't want to do Yibum, but they were willing to do Chalitza. V'katani, and the Mishnah says, Chozr Eitzel Gadol, that we go back to the Gadol for him to do the Chalitza. Ushmamina Chalitzas Gadol Adifa. So from here we can conclude that we do prefer the Chalitza done by the eldest surviving brother. The Gemara says, no, that's not the way to read the Mishnah. Rather, Loi Rotzu Loi Lachloitz V'lo Liabeim. They didn't want to do either Chalitza nor Yibum. Tekavosei Gabi Gadol Lo Rotza Lo Lachlotz V'lo Liabeim. And then to keep things parallel, we would have to say that the Gadol also didn't want to do either or. Well, if that's the case, if you want to stick to that pshat, that lo rotzu means they didn't want to do chalitza nor yibum, why am I chayzrun eitzo gadol? Why do we go back to the gadol, as the Mishnah says, lemichpei, to force him to do chalitza? Lichpei l'didhu, why not force one of the younger ones to do chalitza? So the Gemara answers, in fact, that is the reading of the Mishnah. It's they didn't want to do anything. Kevan de mitzvah alei didei ramyo l'didei kaifinon. Since the mitzvah is upon the eldest brother, the primary mitzvah is upon the eldest brother to do something, so when it comes to forcing, we'll be forcing him to do something. But you don't see in this mission an example of willingness on their part to do even chalitza. Tashma. So again, we point out the inverted house to show that both are equal, the chalitza of the gadol and the chalitza of the katan. Tola begadol ad shiyaboy mimedinas hayam ein shoymen loy. If the brother that was sought out to do something said, let's wait till the gadol, till the older one comes back from abroad, we don't listen to him. If that were so, that the chalitza done by the oldest of the surviving brothers is more desirable, amai ein shomen lo, why does the Mishnah say we don't listen to that suggestion? Nintar dilma asi v'chalitz. Why not wait until that eldest of the brothers comes back in the hope that he will do the chalitza? So you see from here that we don't say chalitza's gadol adif. Rather, they're equal. The Gemara responds, uletamech, according to the way you are reading the Mishnah, the kotonat sheyagdilein shomin lo. The Mishnah says that we don't wait for the minor to become an adult in order to do the yibum. Amai nintar dilma gadol u'miyaveh. Why not wait for him to become an adult in the hopes that he will do the yibum? And we pointed out earlier that everyone, according to this lashon, everyone agrees that bias katan adifa, ela kol shuyei mitzvah lo shahinan. Rather, when it comes to delaying the performance of the mitzvah, we will not delay. Therefore, the Mishnah says in both cases, ein shomin lo. But we cannot conclude from here either way, either chalitza's gadol adifa or it's equal to chalitza's katan. Before we continue in the Gemara, we glance at the side. We have a nosei mivneh, a topic heading with a structural note combined into one note. A triangle will appear shortly, highlighting the names Rav and Rav Yehuda. Shnei Amoraim, two Ameraic authorities, Shisovrim ein koifin, that we do not force. Shafapi de bisman hazeh chalitza koidemes. Even though nowadays chalitza is the more choice approach to take in the case of a man who died leaving no children, im hayavam vayavama shnehem roitzim liabem ein koifin lachloitz veloimar shelo l'shem mitzvah miskavne. If they both want to marry, then we don't force them to do chalitza, claiming that they don't have the proper mitzvah intention. The Gemara, Tanan Hasa, mitzvahs yibum kedemes lemitzvahs chalitza borishona shemis kavnin l'shem mitzvah. Originally, when people had pure thoughts, so precedence was given to the mitzvah of yibum, to the yibum track, that means the marriage track, over the chalitza option. However, nowadays, where purity of thought is lacking, where they don't have mitzvah intention, rather there's the fear that maybe the surviving brother is physically attracted to the widow, and that's the only consideration in marrying her. So, as a result of this lessening of purity of thought, Amru, the rabbis resolved mitzvahs chalitza kodemes lemitzvahs yibum. The more preferable approach is to release her than actually marrying her. Omar Rav, ein koifin. Rav says, however, we will not force this approach, namely the chalitza approach, if both of them want to do yibum. Rashi says at the top line, Omar Rav, ein koifin, if both prefer to marry one another, ein koifin oisei lachloitz. We don't force him to participate in a shoe removal ceremony. Denema lav lemitzvah mechavni upoga b'yisrei shesach, based on the claim that he doesn't have purity of thought, and it's as if he's having intimacy with a forbidden relative, namely a brother's wife. But rather, if they should want to do yibum, we will allow them. However, if, let us say, he wants to do yibum, but she says that she does not want to do, and she says things that are clear, if we can get him to change his mind, to make him make a mistake by saying to him something mistaken, by saying to him chalotzla amanas shetitein loch masayim zuz, you should do chalitza, and in return, or on condition that you will receive 200 zuz, we will do that. We will trick him. V'ilo, and if that's not an option, kafinu le v'cholitz, we will force him, even though he wants to do yibum, but she does not want. Rashi goes on this topic further, but we turn back to the Gemara. So Rav says, ein koifin, if both want to do yibum, we don't force our mindset of preferring chalitza upon them. Ki osu lekame de Rav, when a couple, or when a yibum couple would come in front of them, come in front of Rav, Omar lehu, Rav would say, Iboyes chaloitz, iboyes yabeim. If you want to do chalitza, so be it. If you want to do yibum, so be it. B'didcha tala rachmona. It is your choice. V'im lo yachpoitz ho'ish. The pasuk says if he doesn't want to marry her, then she is to be released through chalitza. Ha'im chafatz. However, if he should want to, so then both choices are open. I boy chalitz, I boy yabeim. If he wants to, he can release her, and if he wants to, he can marry her. V'af Rav Yehuda sovar ein koifin. Rav Yehuda is also of the opinion that we don't force a brother-in-law and sister-in-law that want to do yibum, we don't force them to do chalitza. Mida askin Rav Yehuda begita de chalitza. From Rav Yehuda's opinion is reflected from that which you see in a document known as a chalitza get. Chalitza is the shoe removal ceremony, and when that is done, so a document is written up, and it's called Gita de Chalitza. So let's take a look at the text of Rav Yehuda's Gita de Chalitza, and it reads as follows. And note the Aramaic terms that you see here. Ayich ploinis bas ploni, a certain woman, the daughter of so-and-so. Akrivis yas ploni yivma kadmina lebeidina. She brought her brother-in-law to us in the Beis Din, in the court, the Ishta Mudinu, and it was known to us, it became known to us, the Achva, the Misna Me'abo Ninu, that this is a brother of the deceased having a common father. The Amri Lay, and we said, the court said to him, Itzavis the Yabeim, if you want to do Yibum, you can do Yibum, V'iloi, and if not, Itla lo raglech diamina. So extend your right foot. The Itla lo raglo diamina. And the document continues saying that he does, and he did so. He extended his right foot. The sharas sine me'al ragloye, and she undid the shoe from upon his foot. which is the shoe removal ceremony. V'yarkis banpoi roike de mischazia lebeidina al ara, and she spit in front of us saliva that was visible to the basin, and the spit is ejected from her mouth and it lands on the floor. Not to make the mistake that some people do, that she spits in his face. She spits in front of his face, in front of the Yevam's face, visible to the court, but doesn't actually land on his face, it lands on the floor. Rabbi Chia bar Avya, Messiah bar Mishmei de Rav Yehuda, and Rabbi Chia adds to this text in the name of Rav Yehuda, V'akrinu ma de kosiv b'sefer Raisa de Moshe, and we read it to him and had him read, following us, that which it says in the Sefer Torah of Moshe, the Psukim lo chafatzti lekachta in Dvarim Perek Chafhei Pasuk Ches. So from this text, and especially where you see the dashed underline, you can see that Rav Yehuda also acknowledges that nowadays Yibum is an option if they should both want to do so. In this text, a word was used, and you have an arrow to the side of the Gemara text where you can see it was cited earlier, Ishta Modi'inhu. That was the word that was used. That means it became known to us that this is a brother. The man that came together with the woman was a brother of the deceased from a common father. Pligi ba Rav Acha v'Ravina. There's a machlokes between Rav Acha and Ravina, how it became known to the court his identity as being such, as being a brother of the deceased from a common father. Charomar be'edim. When the text above says it became known to us, it means through witnesses. V'charomar afilu korov afilu isha. And the other opinion says became known to the court even if it was through a relative or through a woman, people that otherwise, when it comes to formal testimony, are not allowed to testify. Relatives of the defendant, women, are not acceptable witnesses. But in this case, according to this opinion, knowledge that so-and-so was a brother from a common father can be attained through the testimony of a korov or isha. And the Gemara concludes, Giluye Milsa V'Almahu. This isn't formal testimony, but rather it's the revelation of information that was previously known. So Giluye is to reveal. It's simply revelation of information. V'Afilu Korov, V'Afilu Ishan. As a result of that, it's not formal testimony, but rather it's simply exposure of information that can be done through a relative or through a woman. Originally, when people had purity of thought, and their intention in the marriage was to do the mitzvah of the Torah, to maintain the name of the deceased, so the preferred track was the marriage track, the Yibum track, over the shoe removal ceremony, which releases the widow to the shuk to marry someone else. Nowadays, where people don't have purity of thought, we prefer that they do chalitza over yibum. Omar Romi Bar Chama Rizok Chazru Lomar Mitzvahs Yibum Kedemes Al Mitzvahs Chalitza. Well, Rami Bar Chama says something interesting, and he says that even more recently the rabbis went back to the original preference of doing yibum over chalitza. Amar li Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Afshitari. So Rav Nachman asks Rami Bar Chama, he says, what, did the nation become more pious? We were taught earlier that there was a lessening from the original people, early society where people had purity of thought. There was a downward movement. And now you're saying that in recent times people have gone back to the old purity of thought? That's very unlikely. So how do you explain this comment made by Rami Bar Chama in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak? Meikara Savri Lo Kavashol. Originally, the opinion followed that of Abba Shaul. Now, he will be quoted in the next line. Ulebasof Savri Lo Karabanan. The reference in the source to Barishona and the Achshav is a reference to the original thinking, or acceptance of Abba Shaul, and then the subsequent rejection, we'll say, and opting to go like the Rabbanan. Now, where do we see their opinions? Tesanya, Abba Shaul Omer, Hakrimis is Yivinto, L'Shem Noi, L'Shem Ishus, L'Shem Dover Acher. Abba Shaul says anyone who marries his widowed sister-in-law because of her pleasant appearance, that's Noi, or because the person is longing to be married, or for some other reason, other than maintaining the name of the deceased. Ki'ilu pogea be'erva, the korovani be'enai lios havlad mamzer. It's as if, says Abba Shaul, it's as if he's having intimacy with a forbidden relative, and it's, in my estimation, as if the offspring born is illegitimate. Now, he's not saying literally illegitimate, but it's close to it. The Chachamim say Yevamo Yavoi Aleha Mikol Makom. The Chachamim disagree with Abba Shaul. They say that Yibum can be done whatever the mindset is, as long as the action of marrying the widow is fulfilled. So that if you then plug in these two opinions to the source above, the original thought, the original approach reflected Abba Shaul, where intent was a primary consideration, and that which, and I should be a little more accurate, the source above, where we saw Barishona V'Achshav, that was a reflection of originally accepting Abba Shaul's approach, and then that which Rami Bar Chama spoke about in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, that reflects the acceptance, the later acceptance of the Rabbanan approach. Man Tana Lahadu Tana Rabbanan. Who is the author of the following unnamed source? Yevamo Yavo Eleha. That's the quote from the pasuk Mitzvah. Shebetchila Hoisa Alav Bichlal Heter. The woman, before she married your brother, so she was heter, she was muteris to you. Nasra, when your brother married her, so she became asur, she's now married to your brother. V'chazra v'hutra, when the brother died, so without leaving no children, so she became muteris to you again. Yachol tafsu lehetero harishon. Could it be that she goes back to her original heter? Talmud lomar Yevamo Yavoy Aleh mitzvah. Man Tana. The Gemara is asking not only who is the Tana, but what is the meaning of this source? Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. So Rav Yitzchak answers both questions, namely who is the author and what is the meaning of the source. We should note on the side we have a mivneh, structural note, where you see a double underline which highlights the names Abba Shaul and the Rabbanan, and a diamond which highlights Shnei Gishois Lahamid Braisa Stuma, two approaches in how to set up this unnamed source. Stuma means literally sealed or unclear by way of name. Is it the Rabbanan or is it like Abba Shaul? So Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi says that the unnamed source is in the spirit of Abba Shaul. It's in accordance with Abba Shaul, the Hachi Kamar. And thusly we are to make sense or understand the source. Yavamo Yava Aleha Mitzvah. That's of course the quote from the pasuk, which you see there is a mitzvah to do yibum. Shebetchila hoysalav bichlal heter. The woman originally, before your brother married her, she was muteris to you. Ratza l'shem noi kainsa, Ratza l'shum ishus kainsa. And at that original state, where she hadn't married your brother yet, you could have married her for whatever reason, for her beauty, for the desire to be a married person, Nezra. Then she became forbidden. Chazra v'hutra, and then she became allowed. Yachol tachzir le'teira harishon. When we say she becomes allowed again, does it mean like originally? Talmud lomar Yevamo yavoi oleha l'mitzvah. The story now is that she's not an option to you like originally, that you could have taken her for any reason, but rather only if you take her with the proper intention, and that is like Abishol. Now here we're focusing. You can see with the markings we've also schooled the Lamed L'mitzvah. That means with proper mitzvah intentions. Only then can you, in fact, take her. So she doesn't go back to, we'll say, Hetera Harishon, where the reasons for taking her could have been any of the above mentioned. Now that she's going back to original heter, she is going not fully to the original heter, but rather she's muteras, but provided you take her, you marry her with the proper mitzvah intention. So with that, we have explained the unnamed source, and Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi does so by claiming it's in the spirit of Abishol. Rava Omar afilu tema Rabbanan. Rava says, no, you can read that source, the unnamed source, in the spirit of the Rabbanan as well. V'hachi kamar, and thusly it can be read. Now, as we go into this source, you'll notice there's two lines from now, a section that's in brackets. During our initial reading, we'll skip that section. The source reads, Yevamo Yavoi Oleha Mitzvah Shebetchila Hoisa B'chlal Heter. Originally, before she married your brother, she was muteres, Ratza Kainsa, Ratza Eina Kainsa. If you want to marry her, you could marry her. If you don't want to marry her, you don't have to marry her. She's a single girl, and those options are open. You choosing to marry her or choosing not so. Nezra, she married your brother, she becomes a surah. She becomes forbidden. She's married now to your brother. Chazra v'hutra, upon his death, she becomes muteres again. Yachol tachzor lehetera harishon. Does she go back to her original heter, her original status? And we're skipping the brackets to the next line. Ratza kainsa, ratza choleitz la. That if you want to take her, you can do so. If you want to release her, you can do so. Talmud lomar Yevamo yavoi oleha mitzvah. The Rashi points out that it's a bigger mitzvah to miyabim her, to marry her, more than chalitza. So that approach is clearly like the Rabbanan, where, as we just saw in the Rashi, it's a bigger mitzvah to be miyabim her even above chalitza. Now, the Gemara asks a question. This question will keep the Gemara occupied for quite a while. We have a long question marking indicating that the question continues about a third of the way down, Mem Amud Aleph. Amo Reisha. State the Reisha of the unnamed source that we saw just a few lines above the 2 lines before the first diamond. That source comes from Maseches Menachos. Now the Reisha, the first part of the source, reads as follows, and we quote a posuk, and we mentioned before that the unnamed source deals with, I should say more accurately than comes from Maseches Menachos, rather it deals with Menachos. And it said, Menachos are meal offerings. And it says, there's a pasuk, it says, Matzos te'ochel b'mokim kadosh. That's a pasuk, mitzvah. And Rashi points out it's a kra yisera. The idea in this pasuk is that the kohanim who eat the balance, the remnants of the mincha after the kmitza was offered, after the handful was put on the altar, the handful of meal offering, so the kohanim eat the balance. And the pasuk says they shall eat it in an unleavened fashion, not allowing it to ferment, to become chametz. And regarding this, Rashi says that the earlier part of the pasuk said, "V'hanoseres min ha-mincha yochlu," that which is left over from the mincha they shall eat. So here, by telling me that they shall eat the remnant of the mincha, is seemingly redundant. So it says mitzvah. We continue at the top of Mem Amar Aleph. Shebetchila hoisa alav bechlal heter. Originally, it was mutter. Rashi says Shebetchila kaidem sheukdish mincha zu hoisa alav bechlal heter. Before it was sanctified to serve as a meal offering, a type of sacrifice. Prior to that, it was mutter. Ne'esra v'chazara v'hutra. Ne'esra becomes forbidden when it was sanctified. And then it becomes mutter upon the offering of the handful. The balance of the mincha then becomes mutter again. Yachol tafsul l'heter harishon. Does it go back to its original heter, its original permission? Talmud lomar matzois teochel b'mokom kodosh mitzvah. Now, this source is a bit vague until we are able to reread it. Now, on the side, we should have pointed out, we have a no-say topic heading, HaGemara Menaseh L'Hoichiach. The Gemara is going to try to prove Mi Chiber HaBraisa HaStuma Derech HaReisha. By analyzing the ratio, this section of Matzos Teachel of the source, we'll try to come to a conclusion who the author is. No-say Shal HaReisha, Zihirus B'Achilas Shirim Menachos Shelo Yachmitzu. The topic at hand is the need to be diligent in consuming the balance of the meal offering on the part of the kohanim in an unleavened fashion. So we continue. Bishlam Olam Rava, the Amar Hamani Rabbanan He. According to Rava, who said that the source was in the name of the Rabbanan, things work out well. Hachi Komar. Here, regarding the Reisha, it reads as follows. And to be understood as follows. Again, let us point out ahead of time, there's a certain section that appears in brackets, which is a section that needs to be skipped initially because the language in it is not accurate. So we continue as saying that the source can be read according to the approach of the Rabbanan and make sense. The source begins, Matzos te'ochel b'mokom kodosh mitzvah. The mincha remnant, that which remains of the mincha after the handful is offered, is to be eaten in a holy place, unleavened. Shebetchila hoisolov v'chlal heter. Originally, it was muter ratza oichla, ratza eino ochla. If he wanted to eat it, he could eat it. If he wants not to eat it, he doesn't eat it. Nesra. Now here we're going to read the section within the printer's parentheses. Nesra, chazara, v'hutra. It became aser and then became mutter again. Yachol tachsul l'heter harishon. Does it go back to its original heter? And here we skip the brackets. Rotza hu ochla. Rotza kohen acher ochla. Is it something optional for the kohen that did it, that processed the mincha, the meal offering, to eat it, or for another kohen to eat it? Talmud lomar matzos teochel b'mokom kodosh mitzvah. We look at the Rashi on the third line from the top. Bishlamol Rava, the Amar Rabbanan He, that the source was in accordance with the Rabbanan, u'mitzvah kotani. V'lo mitzvah, where the source speaks about the performance of the mitzvah and not the issue of the mindset to the purity of mindset to do it with mitzvah intention. Hachi kamer v'chulei v'achlu Actually, let's go back now to the Gemara text. So what we've done is we've read the source in the spirit of the Rabbanan. Now we have a section that we skipped. Let's read it down together. It was pointed out that the mincha originally was heter, then it was sanctified, it became usr, and then becomes mutter again. Does it go back to its original heter? And what does that mean? What do we think it means? Rotza oichla, rotza einu ochla. If he wants to eat it, he can eat it. Or if he opts not to eat it, he doesn't have to eat it. The Gemara rejects that. How can you say that that's the point of deliberation? Rotza einu ochla. Is there an option not to eat the mincha v'alksiv? V'achlu oisam asher kuba bohem. That's the pasuk, and it teaches us that only upon the kohanim's consumption of it do the owners actually achieve the atonement for which the sacrifice was brought at the first place. So there isn't any room to suggest that there's an option not to eat the sacrifice. Ela rotza hu ochla. Rather, what are the options that are presented that we eventually use the pasuk to settle? Rotza hu ochla, rotza kohen acher ochla. If the kohen that processed it wants to eat it, he can eat it, or another kohen could eat it. So we say Talmud lomar matzos te'achel b'mokom kadosh mitzvah. That from the context, this would lead us to understand that it's not an option to have another kohen eat it, but rather the one that processed it. Now, as we saw before in the Rashi here, there's no issue of intention while you're eating. Well, that is the way the Rabbanan presented the source. Remember the section of the source that dealt with the issue of yibum when doing yibum. But according to Rav Yisrael bar Avdimi, that said that very same source, the unnamed source that began with the words Yevamo, Yavo Aleha, that is in the spirit of, or taught in accordance with Abba Shol, and the emphasis was the intention, the mitzvah intention, the purity of thought. Hachamai trei gavni ika. What are the two paths over here in the case of the Menachos? V'chitema rotza l'te'avoin ochla rotza achila gasa ochla. Well, there are two paths here. He can eat it with the intention of te'avon, with desire, or with the intention of overeating, having eaten already to his full content. Any further eating would constitute achila gasa. We'll call it stuffing oneself to the point that he feels sick. The Gemara says that's not an illustration of two options. Achila gasa, mishmo achila. To say that there's an intention of eating it with the achila gasa intention, that's not called eating to begin with. One who on Yom Kippur, after being fully sated through his Erev Yom Kippur meal, continues on Yom Kippur Day eating, but to the point that he feels sick, poter milo suna. He's not in violation of the requirement on Yom Kippur to experience self-deprivation. It's not considered any form of pleasure that would enable us to constitute it as eating if he's eating it as achila gasa. So that doesn't represent two tracks, and we need to see two tracks in order to appreciate the pasuk and what the source is trying to teach me. Ella rotza matzah ochla, rotza chometz ochla. So even according to Rav Yisrael bar Avdimi, there are two tracks. If he should want to eat it as unleavened, so be it. If he should want to eat it as chametz, so be it. The Gemara says that's not an illustration of two tracks in the case of meal offerings? Well, see, the Torah already said lo soifa chometz chelkam. V'yom Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish explains the pasuk to say vafilu chelkam, even the shirayim that the kohanim eat after the handful was placed on the mizbeach, on the altar for burning, lo soifa chometz, it cannot be baked as leavened. So that the suggestion that there are two possibilities and that we're going to settle the matter, when you say there are two possibilities, they both have to be realistic. But according to this most recent suggesting that maybe you could eat the mincha as chometz is not a realistic suggestion from the outset. Ela rotza matzah ochla, rotza cholot ochla. Now, cholot is a process where dough, before it's baked, is put in boiling water, and then afterwards is baked. It's maybe reminiscent of the way we make bagels in the bagels and lox context. That's cholot. So the understanding of the source regarding the menachos and the two tracks, it's true that the issue of intention doesn't play a role, but nevertheless, there are two tracks. And then to that, the source responds and says matzos. It says matzos te'achav v'malkut kodesh, and from this we learn matzos and not cholot. So those are the two tracks, and hence the source can make sense, can be read according to the way Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi suggested in the spirit of Abba Shaul. The Gemara asks on this last point, Hai cholot hechi domi, regarding the boiling, what is the status of dough after chalita? I matzahi, ha matzahi. If it's matzah, if it's considered unleavened, then how is the pasuk excluding it? The pasuk says matzos te'achel. If you're going to say that cholot retains the status of matzah, so how is the pasuk excluding it at the end of the source? The iloi matzah he, and if it's not matzah, if it doesn't have the status of being unleavened, matzah samarachmona. The pasuk already says elsewhere that menachos meal offerings must be maintained as unleavened. So I don't need this pasuk to exclude that which I know from elsewhere. That's already a problem of redundancy. Lo, li'olam eimoloch matzah he. The Gemara insists on saying that cholot really is matzah. Ulahachi tana beikra le'akev. The double, the seeming repetition of the Torah insisting on menachos being matzah is to tell me that it is binding. Namely, it has to be, we'll say, the pure form of matzah without cholot. Well, the Gemara asks if you're saying that the pasuk excludes cholot while at the same time maintaining that cholot has matzah status, ela cholot equals matzahi, the koamino l'mayilcha, so that which we said that cholot is categorized as matzah, what practical application does that have? Lomar, it has the following application. She'odam yoytze bo yedecha vasa b'pesach. Afalpi dechalte meikara, kevan dehader afki betanu lechem oni karina bei. The odam yoytze bo yedecha vasa b'pesach. It's true that in the realm of menachos cholot is excluded, but that's because the pasuk had been redundant regarding the issue of matzos. It was coming to limit you to exclude cholot, even though cholot is considered unleavened. So if it's considered unleavened, but at the same time it's not acceptable in menachos, so what practical ramifications does it have by referring to cholot as matzah? So the Gemara answered that if you eat on your Seder night, Passover Seder night, you eat dough that had been boiled first before baking, you nevertheless fulfill your matzah obligation of eating matzahs on Pesach. And the reason for that is because the standard for matzah is dependent on whether we can call it lechem oini, the bread of the poor. And therefore, we say that even though you subjected the dough initially to some boiling, but since you put it into an oven for baking, it still answers that requirement of being called lechem oini. And that's what's required for the Pesach Seder night.